Winston Churchill became British Prime Minister in May 1940, coinciding with Germany's invasion of Western Europe. From the outset, he differed significantly from his predecessors, mastering propaganda imagery and frequently positioning himself close to the action. Churchill's wartime presence often featured him in military attire. This practice stemmed from Britain's tradition of bestowing honorary officer ranks, a privilege Churchill earned through his extensive military service, including combat roles in India, the Sudan, and the Second Boer War. Despite his resignation following the Gallipoli campaign, Churchill remained an Army Reserve officer until 1924. As Prime Minister, he retained honorary military ranks in the Royal Air Force and various British Army units, indulging his fondness for uniforms and medals. Churchill's frontline visits, a source of annoyance to his staff, reflected his unique status as a wartime leader who had experienced battle firsthand. His insistence on visiting troops during critical moments, such as the Battle of Britain and Rommel's advance in North Africa, exemplified his commitment to morale and understanding battlefield conditions. Churchill's audacious request to join the first wave of British troops on D-Day was swiftly rejected. Despite being barred from the initial assault, he managed to land at Normandy a week later, demonstrating his determination to be present during pivotal moments of the war. According to contemporaries and his biographers, it was because he wanted to have input on the events, to help solve problems on the ground. These visits also fulfilled Churchill's romantic conception of a war leader at the scene of action. It's fair to say that his visible and inspirational presence was held in genuine affection by officers and men alike. But it was inevitable that Churchill would one day fly too close to the flame. The British Prime Minister was nearly killed by the Germans in March 1945 from one of the most famous operations of the war, the crossing of the River Rhine. The action began on the 24th of March 1945, when Churchill visited Field Marshal Soubern at Montgomery's headquarters at Venlo in the Netherlands. Churchill wanted to witness British and US forces of the 21st Army Group crossing the Rhine in an enormous operation codenamed Varsity. This was the airborne component of the invasion to assist the ground troops by seizing footholds on the German side of the Rhine. In total, 1.2 million Allied troops crossed between the 23rd and the 27th of March, piercing Hitler's last defense line in the west, with US forces also crossing the Rhine further south. On the 25th of March, Churchill visited the headquarters of the Allied Supreme Commander, General Eisenhower, with Monty in tow. During their conversation, Eisenhower told Churchill of a house 10 miles away on the west bank of the Rhine that had been sandbagged by American troops, offering an excellent vantage point to observe the German side of the river. This area had not yet having been fully occupied by Allied forces. Eisenhower proposed a visit, and Churchill leapt at the opportunity. They piled into staff cars and drove to the large house, where Churchill scanned the far bank 400 yards away with his binoculars. He could see flat meadows, and officers reported that no German troops appeared to be in evidence. In the distance, Churchill could see RAF planes pounding German positions. Eisenhower had to leave on other business, and shortly afterward, Churchill noticed an American landing craft mooring below the house. He turned to Monty and said, "Why don't we cross over the river for a look?" With them, they only had 6 armed American soldiers. The launch soon reached the far bank, and Churchill scrambled out, dressed in one of his many honorary colonel's uniforms and with a cigar clamped between his teeth. He followed a path previously marked by British infantry who had only recently landed there. He then scaled a high dike for a good view. Fighting was taking place a mile or so away, But after a discussion with the American generals, the decision was taken to try and get closer to the action. However, the captain of the landing craft warned that half a mile away, towards Basel, fighting was ongoing. German mines protected the river, making it too dangerous for the Prime Minister to go by water. Crossing back over to the west bank of the Rhine, Churchill and his party decided to drive up to Basel. At Basel, they came upon the large railway bridge previously blown up by the Germans. The cars were concealed, and then Churchill and some of his party clambered up the ruined west side of the bridge to observe the fighting on the other side. Churchill noted incoming German artillery in 4 shell salvos that were falling on British positions about a mile away. But it appears that the movement on the bridge was spotted by the Germans, for suddenly the guns changed targets and began shelling the bridge Churchill was standing on. The first salvo nearly got him as 4 shells landed in the river only 100 yards or so from where Churchill and his party were watching on the bridge. As German artillery rained down and detonated in the water, Churchill was enjoying every second, and only with great difficulty could his staff persuade him to clamber back down from the bridge. A second salvo fell behind Churchill, landing close to where the party's cars were concealed. The decision was taken to leave at once. In between the barrages, Churchill, Monty, Simpson and Brooke were led to the cars, which left the area at some speed. It was the closest Churchill managed to get to death or injury in World War II, and he wrote about it gleefully in his memoirs. However, Churchill was not deterred by this setback and still determined to see more. On the 26th of March, the British Second Army Group commander, Lieutenant General Simmels Dempsey, drove the Prime Minister in a jeep over a new pontoon bridge that had been erected by British engineers at Xanten. As Churchill's little convoy drove off the bridge, they passed a large collection of rather bedraggled German prisoners. They must have been shocked as they saw Churchill drive slowly past. Churchill returned back across the Rhine later that day aboard a tracked water buffalo amphibious vehicle, marking Churchill's last foray into an active battlefield in World War II. Thanks indeed for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.